So, welcome everybody to a new seminar series in the summer of 2023. We're very proud and happy, come on in, to have with us Pepe Alcami today, and he will be introduced more in detail by our dear Ahmed.
Thank you, Alex, for organizing this exciting seminar again series. And we are very happy to have Pepe today, who is coming from Munich. He's worked at the Max Planck Institute for Biological Intelligence and at LMU. I know Pepe for quite some time. I'm not going to say the exact year because it will make us look old, but for more than 10 years. He did his bachelor degree in biology in Madrid in Spain, then moved to Paris where he did his PhD in l'École Normale Supérieure. Then he did a postdoc in Munich, and then he stayed there now as a PI, where he is doing a lot of exciting things from single-cell neurophysiology up to natural behavior in canaries, and that's what he's going to talk to us about today. So thank you for accepting the invitation.
Thanks a lot, Ahmed, for the introduction. And so today I'm going to tell you about some behavioral work I've been doing on canaries, a specific behavior we found out, which are the duels. So I did this work mostly at the MPI for biological intelligence in the Wiesen. I have now my lab at the LMU in Munich, and still keep working on the Wiesen on these topics, and then in Berkeley. So we're interested in two different aspects. We're interested in behavior. We're interested also at other very different level in brains, and we really want to understand in the lab the link between brains and behavior. So here you have the example of our beloved animal model, which are canaries. It's a virtuoso songbird, and like all songbirds have evolved very specialized brains. Here's a staining from a brain where you can we label the axons, which link different brain regions, and you can visualize very easily all these regions here, which are specialized song nuclei that allow these birds to learn the songs and to produce this fine motor skill. So they're a really suitable animal model to link specific computations in brain areas to behavior. But now we bump into a very general question that neurosciences are dealing now with, which is behavior has been approached by very different traditions, if you wish. So there's been the classical behavioral ecology, where in the field there's been lots of research trying to understand natural behavior. And then there's been this reduction of natural behavior in the lab, which behavior neuroscientists we tend to do, so we can look at mechanisms. And I just plotted for the occasion this graph where I tried to basically illustrate this idea of how much we should simplify in the lab a behavior so it's still meaningful in ecological terms and evolutionary terms. So if we think of some animals in the field, they will be interacting with doing some natural behavior that will be quite complex, lots of animals interacting, and the computations of their brains will also be extremely complex, trying to compute sensory information from other birds, performing motor actions. And whenever we put these animals in the lab, we tend to reduce the number of animals that interact. And the major problem we have in the neuroscience is how much these computations that these birds are doing, these animals are doing in the lab, really relate to the brain computations that happen in the wild. So how much should we simplify this behavior? And basically from having a flock of lots of animals, we cannot record from all the brains simultaneously, and we bring them to the lab to manipulate or understand these circuits in detail. Where should we sit in this line, from a single animal in the lab to the field? So we'll try to answer that question on how much we should simplify this behavior by introducing a new partner. And what I always keep in mind here is whenever I think of birds singing, I think also of brains interacting, receiving this information and acting to act on other birds. So birdsong is an extremely interesting behavior. Birds learn songs from their tutors, which are the parents. So it's a culturally transmitted behavior. And one of the functions, and the classical one we tend to keep in mind when we go to the lab, is singing in many songbird species. So songbirds are very diverse. There's 5,000 species. In some of them, males and females sing. In the ones I'm going to tell you about, only males sing. And females select males according to their songs. So there's a clear function in mate attraction and mate selection. And females answer back, but they don't sing, so they will answer, reply with calls or with other displays. But there's many other functions of birdsong, and we tend not to bring those into the lab. And if we think of this function of males, so here's a male in one of our aviaries, and a female coming to the male while he's singing. And we know that females are really attracted by songs and specific features of songs. But these males are not alone. Actually, they are in a competing environment with other males. And females will choose males depending on how they perform relative to other males. So what I'm going to do here is to first go to the field and then bring to the lab these males to study the emerging properties that appear at this network of interacting birds, which are going to tell us a lot about how these songs are modulated by other males. So what happens if we include competing males in the picture? So let me first drive you through this behavior we're looking at, which are canary songs. So this is a representation of a canary song in a sound spectrogram. So what we see here, we have decomposed the frequencies of sound in the y-axis. So as you know, sound is propagating waves in the air that can hit your eardrum. And we can decompose all these frequencies, which your cochlea does actually, so the higher the frequency, the higher the pitch, and we represent that in time. So we can see that there is several elementary units. So this will be a syllable. And canaries tend to repeat the same syllable many times. So we have a first syllable here. Then we have another syllable coming here. And again, a train of syllables of this type, another one, another one, and finally another one. So these songs are long compared, you may have in mind the classic one-animal model that we use in songbird neuroscience, which is a zebra finch. These are very short songs compared to the canary. So they are long. The arrangement of syllables is also complex. They have a syntax and a large repertoire of syllables. So this is how it sounds, song sounds. Let me see how to increase this. Which microphone should I rise up? Hey, could you hear it? Let me play it again. Wait. So this is a canary song in isolation. If we go to the field, we will rarely listen to songs in isolation. So this is a canary I found in Pico Island in the Azores. So they live in a wide variety of landscapes. In high grassland, in forests. So we have here in Fayal Island in the Azores. They also establish themselves very often at the border of forests, where they can propagate their sounds very well in fields. Yeah. Sorry, see, these are pictures I took when I went to look for these birds and try to understand what the behavior looked like in the wild. And in all of these landscapes, you will have many birds at hearing range singing at the same time. So these songs are not isolated, and different males hear each other and potentially interact. How does this sound if you go to the wild? So to these islands where they are endemic. So they only live in these volcanic islands, which are Madeira, Azores, and Canary Islands. And here in Pico Island, in this field I had located in the breeding season, a nest and a canary going back to the nest here on these trees, and another one on these bushes, directed two directional microphones that would capture sound specifically from one or the other direction. So I labeled here the microphone in blue with this blue bird, and in red with this red one. And if we look at the recordings, pointing at what these birds were singing, we can see that the songs co-occur in time, overlap. So here we have the first microphone and a second one, and I labeled here the syllables of canaries recorded in one or the other microphone. So you can see that songs are lasting for several seconds, and there's significant amount of overlaps in these periods. These recording, these spectrograms, however, are very noisy. So you can see these syllables, but you can see calls and sounds from other birds that are contaminating the trace. We have about 5 species at least that are singing and calling in the same fields. So to look at the dynamics of these birds singing and whether, taking out the interspecific interactions and looking at how several male canaries interact with each other, I went back to the Wiesen, to the Max Planck, and designed a naturalistic, so nature-like social setting where we could quantify well this behavior. And here I did put 3 males with 2 females. So the males here I labeled in black, and you have 2 females in the same group. I use this ratio because that's the ratio that people have found in the wild. So there's more males than females, which puts them in a competition context for females. If we look at the behavior in the wild, in the lab, you can see here a first bird that will start singing. That's followed by another bird. So there was a first singing interaction. We'll play it again afterwards. The bird is coming back, and they are overlapping their songs again. You see now they will fight, they attack each other again. And this behavior goes on for days and weeks and actually months, and we can record it. The problem is that they sing very loud, close to each other, so we need to separate the songs of the birds. So I'll tell you how we managed to do that. I'll show you first a quantification of fights. So about half of the times that they do these overlapping periods, singing periods, these will be followed by fighting. Whereas only a small fraction of singing, solo singing, is followed by fights. And this is why I decided to call it duels, reminding me of the Three Musketeers and D'Artagnan, as you know, these duels. So back then, Dumas revived it. They were forbidden, they were very dangerous. And the Royal Guard were fighting with duels and killing each other. And these are high motor skills, highly skilled motor actions that were occurring in 2 musketeers by then, or humans fighting with each other, and they were a very dangerous display. So that's why I call these duels in analogy to what the canaries are doing. If we now go into the songs and try to characterize these duels, this is what you would record normally from a central microphone, a microphone that's in a room that records all the sound. You can see syllables that are overlapping, and it's impossible to separate the acoustic features of the 2 songs. What we did for that is to use these backpack microphones that were implemented by Manfred Gar over the years at the MPI, where one can put a backpack microphone that detects other source sound from individual birds. So the same recording that's pretty messy from a central microphone. As you can see, we can isolate very well the songs coming from one or the other bird. So this would be a song from one bird. There's still some contamination from the other trace, but it's pretty clear. One can isolate the 2 songs and then look at what are the dynamics that emerge whenever one puts these birds together. So what are the dynamics of singing during these duels? So here what I have done is align all the songs from one day from the canary painted blue here. So the song onset is at 0. These bars all represent songs, each one a rendition of songs going up in the y-axis from the blue bird. And I aligned, respectively, when the bird aligned to these songs. I aligned the songs of the white canary to see when this canary painted white is singing relative to the blue one. So you can see that songs cluster around time 0. If we look at, for example, this song here, you can see that the white canary starts singing before the blue one. So this bird, I would say that it is leading. He's behaving as a leader in this specific song. But in the song that was coming just before, the blue canary started, and this canary overlapped. So this canary followed the other bird. So in the previous one, this bird was behaving as a follower. The previous one, again, was behaving as a leader, as a follower, and so on. So you can see that on a rendition-to-rendition base, on a song-to-song basis, the same bird would behave as a leader or follower. And these dynamic roles can be depicted if now we sum up all the activity from this raster of songs and make a pretty similar histogram. So most of the activity we see on the left corresponds to this canary singing before the onset at time 0 of the songs from the blue canary. And many of these songs will continue during overlaps, and we will have the addition here of the songs when this bird behaves as a follower, when these songs will start after the blue bird has started. So these songs are extremely dynamic if we look at a song-to-song basis. And if we look at on a day-to-day basis, they are also extremely dynamic. So for example, for this group, bird 2, I aligned bird 2 songs to the onset of bird 1. And you can see that bird 2 is mostly a follower. There's an onset around 2 seconds where these birds start overlapping the songs aligned to the songs of bird 1. That was on day 4 after putting the backpacks. If we go on day 6, there's also this bird is also behaving more as a leader relative to these 2 days before. And these shapes actually change a lot. And on day 7, he's mostly a leader and rarely following. So these roles are constantly shifting on a song-to-song and day-to-day basis. So this is what recording these canaries for many days looks like, these PSTHs. So you can see that this bird was most likely was acting mostly as a follower, since this peak is stronger after 0. And we could reproduce this behavior for 5 groups of 3 males and 2 females. There's this peak around 0, shows that they overlap their songs. And you have here in this dotted line a randomization of all the songs. You can see there's a clear different peak that pops up. So this was really an occasion for us to ask, well, in this emergent behavior that we cannot study isolated in only one bird, but we need 2 birds interacting to see how they, to start interacting and see how these songs might change in duels. We could ask whether the songs were the same, whether birds were singing solo songs. So every bird is singing solo songs at some point. And also when these birds were singing leading songs or following songs. So this would be in the category of overlapping songs. So like I said before, the leader starts first, and the follower starts afterwards, after the leader has started singing. If we look at song length, so this is a feature that I will focus on. So we said these songs are very complex, and there's coding most likely at very different levels, at the whole song, at the syllable scale. And here we're looking at the whole song and song length or duration. And this is critical because we know that females are attracted by long songs. And if we compare the solo songs as here to the length duration of the leading songs or following songs, you can see that this bird is singing longer songs whenever he's leading, or when this bird is following. If in the same group with 3 males we look at the second bird, you can see that this bird is also increasing singing length when he's leading versus following, versus soloist, but not in this case when the bird is following. And we have finally a third bird that does not take part to duels and that sings solo songs. So we have a third bird that behaves differently and only seems to adopt this soloist strategy. If we go through all the groups, this was a consistent trend that leading songs were longer than solo songs, and statistically across all the birds, following songs were not longer. So this trend was consistent in the 5 groups, and interestingly, not only the length, but also how variable this length was increasing when birds were leading. So this behavior becomes also more variable whenever the birds start singing. So basically, this is telling us that whenever the bird starts singing, is a leader, and is interrupted by another bird, there will be a change of the model program, and the song will be longer. And that's why I called this plasticity, which we confirmed also in doing playbacks. Whenever the birds are interrupted by control stimuli, they also increase the duration of their songs. So now comes one question, which is why do 2 birds duel while the third bird is being mostly a soloist? So I looked at the songs of these birds, And you can see that these are representative songs. The soloist turns out actually to have more distinct songs relative to the two duelists that had more similar songs to each other. So we quantified all these features from songs, which are repetition rates, so how often they will repeat syllables per given units of time, speech length, syllable duration, and many other parameters. And the three parameters that turned out to be significantly different that were between the two duelists compared to the soloist were the three. And so I'm plotting here the difference, so how different these parameters are between the two duelists relative to duelists and the soloist. You can see that the songs are less different, so more similar between the duelists in terms of repetition rate, syllables, pitch, and song length. So this suggests that the birds that do this dueling behavior are actually basically competing in a more similar acoustic space and singing more similar songs. So this analysis was done on the soloist songs. So these birds, even out of the duels, have more similar songs. And this opens a lot of interesting questions of how, what comes first. Are they singing more similar, which maybe females like and put pressure on these two to compete for them? Do they adjust their songs to please the female who's signaling back that she likes these songs? So there's a lot of interesting experiments that come out of this observation that we started to investigate. And well, now I would just shortly conclude what I showed you. So as soon as we put these birds in a competition context, so birds are not isolated, we reproduce this competition context we find in the wild, then canaries overlap their songs in duos. They sing longer and more variable songs when they lead these duels. In groups of 3 males and 2 females, there's 2 males that do the duel, the large majority of duels, and there's 1 bird that's basically taking a soloist strategy. And then dueling canary songs are more similar to each other than to the soloist song. So I think this is a beautiful result, because it's really telling us that we cannot isolate a male or a male with a female, but there's actually new features that appear whenever we include the competing males in the network, and the song itself produced by the individual bird is different. So these songs are going to be longer. These birds are not only going to produce songs, but they will interact and integrate the sensory information from other birds to change the ongoing motor program. So that introduces loops, sensory motor loops, that are extremely interesting, especially if we're interested in what's going on behind. So how does the brain compute this sensory information to change an ongoing motor program that, once birds are adult, is supposed to be kind of fixed or quite hardwired? So the songs change in this situation. And of course, being interested in this motor program and the neural networks that underlie it, this for me was very important, because I'm really interested in this behavior that's closer to the natural one. And definitely I need to include these males to understand how the brain codes these singing and these social interactions and what the neural code behind is. So now let's just discuss a bit in terms of literature. So literature is really interesting here. From behavioral ecologists mostly perspective, we gain a lot of insights into canary behavior. Before that, I think the main take-home message is that we really need to go closer to natural or naturalistic social conditions that include males, if you want to study a behavior that's meaningful in terms of the ecological context where it takes place and for which it evolved. So here, competition and signaling between males, which goes also beyond. But why are these songs longer? Why do male canaries sing longer songs when they lead the duels? And there's a really interesting paper that actually gives, I think, a reason, explores why. So in this paper, the authors categorize the syllables, so the songs, as not as leading and following, which would be who starts first, but as overlapping, who finishes last, or overlapped, who finishes first. And they were playing always song A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B to females, where B was always outlasting, overlapping A. And then after priming the females, they played these songs, only A or only B. And it turns out that females responded soliciting copulation more often to the overlapping songs. So the beat that was always played to overlap the other one. So if females like overlapping songs, and you are dueling and start first, there's a pressure to sing longer to be able to overlap. And I think this is most likely what is happening. And let's say the evolutionary constraint why these birds end up singing longer because of the female preference for overlapping songs, outlasting songs. And then I would shortly tell you about future directions we're following now. So, of course, it would be really interesting to understand well what are the female responses in this competition context. So not a response to playbacks, but now that we know that we can reproduce this behavior in the lab, see how females respond. Do they prefer the leading, the overlapping? Do they solicit copulation? And this is a really, really complex behavior because females like overlapping songs, but they also prefer the less aggressive males. And here, both of the birds that actually duel are also more aggressive. So how do these roles relate to each other, and what do females finally prefer? And who is actually having more reproductive success? So now we're tracking the videos and analyzing also the chicks. So they had chicks, and I'm going to see who is the father and who was the most successful from all of these. Now going back to the songs. So we looked at song length, which is a song scale parameter. But what happens at the level of syllables, and what other time scales are relevant here and that females might choose from? So we know females, for example, are attracted not only to long songs, but also to specific syllables that are actually even called sexy syllables that trigger copulation solicitations. Are they adjusting these? Are they trying to adjust them to what the other one is singing? So we're now analyzing, doing this fine analysis of songs during duels, and asking basically how they change in this online process of singing and changing the song as the birds listen to other birds. And of course, how is that encoded in the brain? So how these timescales and these interactions, these sensory-motor loops, are constantly being activated whenever another bird starts singing and they adjust their songs, how they encode it across different brain areas. So that's something we are investigating in collaboration with Frédéric Tönnissen in Berkeley, and also with Kevin Yu, who was doing his PhD with Frédéric. And we're now getting to analyze all these syllables and these changes, but also what's the neural code behind. And well, finally, I think this is the most important slide. So acknowledgement slide. I'd like to thank Manfred Gar, with whom I started doing this project when I was a postdoc in his lab. We can keep working on it. Shu and Ma was helping a lot with the quantification of these behaviors. There's a lot of people that were very important all throughout, even if they didn't directly contribute to this project. Santosh is a PhD student now, and we're actually looking at features and variation of these types of songs across seasons. And he helped also annotating these songs. And of course, Frédéric and Kevin, with whom we keep working on it. And I think that's going to be it. So thanks a lot for your attention. I'll be very happy to take questions.
Thank you. Questions?
Yes.
If I may, I have a question. In this scenario with the three, well, thank you for the wonderful talk. It was very captivating, and enjoyed it a lot. So you have this scenario with three males, and two of them are dueling, and I understand the third one then just does his own thing by doing a solo song. Why sing at all when the two are dueling? Is there an explanation to that?
Yes. So that's an excellent question. Thanks for the question. So, in fact, it turns out there's two females. And the two dualist birds, so I didn't quantify that, but by observing the birds, seem to basically fight for the attraction of the same female. And the other bird sings to the other male, to the other female that the other ones are not trying to attract. So basically, he's alone and doesn't have competition for the second female. But most likely, if there's no competition, you don't need to sing much because, anyways, it's going. So that's probably what drives also that they sing less, and the other ones seem to be interested in the other one, in the other female. So I think that's what explains the situation, but I still have to quantify this.
If I may, a follow-up
Yeah.
question: are there any quality differences or attractiveness differences between the females also? Like, is it just
That's,
making the best of a bad job, or what, how do you?
That's an excellent question. Who
Okay.
is choosing who? Did the most attractive female choose this bird that doesn't need to duel and is not paying attention to the other ones, who then are going to try to attract the other one? Are the males putting that pressure and choosing? I don't know. I think what's to answer that, I should go to the first time I put them in this group and see how they interact and how females or males interact and who kind of chooses first. In terms of attraction, it's very difficult to know what is attractive in a female. So same as we know a lot, there's a lot of work that has been done to play songs to females to see what they find more attractive. I think I'm not aware of any work that has done the opposite to see. So in principle, females are choosing, but that would be very interesting to see if one of them is more attractive to any standards and to understand a bit these dynamics. Yeah, that's an excellent question. Yeah, I think about it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Any more questions?
Yes.
No, one. We need
For the online people.
I was just wondering, how do you measure aggressive level, like in birds? Because you mentioned that females sometimes like the aggression, factor is also something very important.
So the aggression I quantified here, that when they fight, they fly against each other. They often attack with the beak, or just push the other bird. So that's how I quantify the aggression between males. But I'm not sure that's what you were asking.
Do you measure like the time, like how?
the level, like how many fights, like the level. How do you? What does it mean?
No,
increase?
that's an excellent question. I just measure whether in a time window after the singing, they're going to attack each other. But I didn't have a quantification of how severe the fight was. That's a very good point. So I mean, that's the next level, right? To understand a bit also who attacks whom. Yes, totally, and maybe a level of aggressive. So there's many different displays in this escalade that are duels, right? So it's a signal that you're ready to escalate. You're gonna overlap, and then you're kind of ready for a fight. And how strong are these fights getting over the time, and who's attacking whom, who feels more threatened? That probably we can look at it. So there's many ways of attacking. So there's also signals. So birds really like to open they open the wings and approach the beak, and that's already an aggressive signal. I didn't quantify those. So those probably are kind of a smaller aggression level, but it's enough so that a bird may fly away. And then whether they attack with the beak, they like going with the beak onto the eyes of the other ones. So we can probably make a gradient of attacks. That's a very good point. I think we should do that. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. So it may be related to both previous questions as well. I was wondering if you could measure the energetics of singing, and maybe this could explain when they stop and when they are dueling.
That's a very interesting question. So you mean, do they stop when they basically are extenuating and they cannot sing longer? How would you measure that? So in principle, the idea is, so I think it's a very honest signal. So if you're able to outlast the other one and sing longer, that's another signal that you're fitter. You can, and actually the longer you sing, the more testosterone you have, which is also a very honest signal that females may be selecting for. How far are they from this maximal performance? I don't know. Before I started looking at this, you can read in the literature this comment, but I think nobody measured.
But maybe you manipulate their diet,
to give them less energy.
Yeah, less or more energy.
Yeah.
So
here we give them ad libidum energy. I don't know if animal protocol.
Restrict them.
if any more protocols will allow us to do that. But yeah, that's a very good idea. So I think that has not been quantified, but the field actually was, before I started looking at that, there was the idea that they were already singing at the maximum performance because it was extremely difficult. And then you see that they increased 50% the singing in this duel, so they definitely are not. It could be also there's interactions with females that signal and they would stop, or another bird attacks you and you stop because of something else. But definitely maybe playing with that energy supply could be an interesting way to go. Yeah.
Thanks, Pepe, for the talk and really interesting seeing the duels between the birds. I'm wondering if you could say some more if I had missed it about the learning process and how the birds learn this. For example, if you isolated a bird and it's just singing by itself, then is it a poor dueler later in life? Or is there a critical time in this learning process, such as like a juvenile bird can learn, or an adult bird would not be able to then learn and ever become a good dueler? Or just something about the learning process, curious about.
So that's an excellent question. Let me first make the point that so in principle, these are fully adult, and they have already learned their songs. So in principle, they are not learning anymore, definitely in this season. Whether better performing birds or that have better skills are going to be able to duel, whereas others won't be able to, it's reasonable to think. But this goes back also to Alex's question. So we're assuming that the best ones in terms of singing are the ones dueling, but maybe it is the soloist that doesn't need to duel that makes a unique song, and no one can compete with that bird. So I think there's an assumption there of who is kind of the best singer, and for that we can definitely quantify the songs, the features of songs we know as sexy, and try to answer that question. But I think we also need to go through the process from the beginning to see who is more attractive to the females. So definitely yes. I think in these, as we know that we're quantifying all these features, we can classify the sexiness depending on what we know that females like most, and see who sings the sexiest songs. But again, we have to go there. Maybe you don't need to sing the sexiest and exhaust yourself energetically if you sing unique songs. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. That's interesting. Yeah, it could be some the song, individual song plus the dueling ability. That would be interesting if the actual evaluation is something on both of those.
Totally. Yes.
Maybe related, I don't know. I was wondering how often can it be that you can directly compare the soloist performance with then a bird that is also a duelist, and how much do the songs relate? Like,
yes.
Can they be completely new for the duel, or is it anyway similar to their solo performance?
That's an excellent question. So now when we're looking at these syllables, we're comparing for the same birds the solo syllables and the acoustic features with when the same birds when they duel and with the other birds. But when we compare with the same birds dueling, we can see if there's some creativity, some new feature that appears. We're looking into it. I don't have the results yet, but I hope I can answer you in a few months. Yeah, that's a great question.
Thanks for the talk. In the naturalistic conditions, do you think the females have same repetitive male selection? When there are just 3 males in the same setting, do they identify the males, like if they mated them before? And do you think there's a preference in it?
That's a very good question. So I think there's 2 elements. One of them is whether in this reduced setting, how important mate selection is. And also what role females play in selecting males. Because they cannot go away if they are not interested. They are seen in this restricted environment where there may be forced copulations also. So that's the one thing. They definitely have the choice. And 2 males seem to duel for the same female, which suggests there might be a selection by females, but I think we need to follow them from the beginning. Then of course, the selection will be very different. So if you are in an island, you're in the Azores, and you go to nearby field, and there's different dialects, and you're attracted to different song features, definitely there would be a way stronger selection. So definitely, that's a dimension we don't capture in this naturalistic environment. Yeah.
Thank you. So when the leader starts singing and the follower starts afterwards, is there a tendency for the follower to start after a certain time length, or is it a random?
That's an excellent question. I don't have the answer. That's just why we're now analyzing the syllables. So there's some sort of separation that helps us, but we're now clustering and classifying these syllables, which turns out to be more complex than we thought, because these syllables are very variable. So once we have all this classification and we have an order, we can say if they arrive at a specific syllable in an order after another syllable. I cannot tell you right now. It seems like, yes, there's some specific moments where they get in, but yeah, we're still looking at it. That's a great question.
I see. And what about time in general, without looking at the syllables?
It's extremely variable. So sometimes they will literally overlap at the last syllable, which I wonder how they managed to do it. And other times they will start earlier. So I guess there might be strategies involved there, how secure you want to go. But the more secure you go, because of course if you arrive too late, then probably kind of lost for the female. If you arrive in the last two syllables, you may mask the other one and then clearly win duel. And as you saw here, actually, they even sometimes have these follower leader, where they go back and overlap again after being overlapped. So it seems super variable. So right now I cannot tell you. It seems that also there's some patterns and some syllables they prefer to go for. Which ones are successful, I also don't know yet. So the dimensions beyond the song scale, looking at syllables, our order, are ramifying and fascinating. So maybe I can come in 1 or 2 years and tell you more about it.
Thank you.
Then take the next question from online.
Yeah.
I can give you the
mic.
Thanks a lot. Okay, so this one is by Pradeep. Thank you for the great talk. Could you explain the link between aggression and duels again? And did you observe this type of behavior in any other singing bird species or songbird species?
So the link between duels and fights, the fights increase about 4 times relative to solo songs. Then other species. So I didn't, but actually behavioral ecologists did it, and there's many other species that overlap their songs, and that's considered an aggression signal. So a signal to escalate. Yeah. So that's known from other species.
Great. Thank you so much. You have
yes, it's overlap. Yeah. No, we de-escalate. Pepe will be around tomorrow the whole day if somebody wants to talk to him. So and thank you, Pepe, and thank you, Alex, for organizing the seminar series.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.